Welcome to the Prescription for Admission podcast, where we talk about hospitals and hospital-based care, who you can expect to meet, and what you may experience during your time in the hospital, both as a patient and also as a healthcare provider working in a hospital. My name is Dr. Monique Nugent. I am a practicing hospitalist and also the author of Prescription for Admission, the book, where I talk about many of the same topics. Thank you for joining me and enjoy the show. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Prescription for Admission podcast. I am your host, Dr. Monique Nugent, and this is season 2. In fact, this is the first episode of season 2, and I'm really excited for our guest. We are joined today by Miss Aimée Yawnick. Aimée Yawnick is a certified conscious dying coach, doula, and educator, and she's the founder of Leaving in Love. She is dedicated to helping individuals and families approach the end of life with peace, clarity, and compassion. Drawing from a background in life coaching and nearly 2 decades in health and fitness, Aimée brings a holistic and heart-centered approach to her work. Her mission is to shift our cultural relationship with dying and help encourage people to be proactive instead of reactive, to plan, reflect, and communicate openly before a crisis arises. Aimée believes that when we are prepared for death consciously and with intention, we can create the possibility of a more meaningful and love-filled final chapter. And I couldn't find an idea of anybody better to start season 2 with than you, Aimée, because
Thank you.
Prescription for Admission is all about being prepared. And part of hospital stays, part of the hospitalized experience might include dying. And how we navigate that, I find really starts well before we actually get into the hospital. So
Hopefully.
Aimée and I are going to talk about difficult conversations and how to have the difficult conversation with your loved ones about their ideas of death and dying, what they would want their final days to look like before you have to make those decisions in the hospital. I was once quoted as saying, if I'm looking at you in the hospital to make a decision around death and dying, it's usually because there aren't great decisions left to be made, right? And so the time to have those conversations is before you need to. So Aimée, thank you so much for being here.
I like to say thank you for having me. I'm very excited about this conversation with you. I like to say that end of life is no time to have end of life discussions. It's just, there's too many emotions. There's too much distraction. It's not a good time to make important decisions.
Yeah. So how did you get into this line of work, this really important line of work in helping us to discuss, navigate, be proactive around the final parts of life?
Truly, I have no idea. It was never in my plan to work in end of life. It didn't even enter the realm of possibility for me. I'm a trained life coach. I'm trained in fitness and nutrition. And I've always been on that proactive side of life, like doing things and being empowered about what's happening. I started a side business when I was a health and fitness coach to cook healthy meals for very busy families. And I would deliver it to them. And then COVID hit. And everybody went home, and what did they do? They started cooking. So that business just kind of stopped, and I didn't want to go back to what I had already done. I'm an entrepreneur at heart, so I was wondering what was next. And I looked for a volunteering position in my community. I figured it would be with animals, but I saw an opportunity to volunteer for hospice. And it truly was a calling. Like there was something tapping on my shoulder saying, do that. Yeah. So I became a hospice volunteer, and I did that for about 4 months and found it to be extremely inspiring. I felt privileged to be sitting bedside with individuals who are at the end of their life and still didn't know what to do with that. I just knew that this felt right to me. And my husband and I went on vacation, and he went to get a tea and I went to look for a novel, and I found a book. And it was called The Book of Two Ways. And I was reading the back of it, and the antagonist was a death doula. And I went, whoa, what is a death doula? I'd never heard that before. I got chills. I grabbed the book, and on vacation, I just started researching. What's a death doula? How do you become a death doula? That was in December of 2001. In January of 2002, I had registered to start my certifications. And that's what I did in 2022, was become certified as an end-of-life coach, an end-of-life doula, and an end-of-life educator.
That's wonderful. And I find that people who work in this space of hospice and end of life, they all kind of say what you just said, this is a calling.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't do anything other than this once I figured out what I was supposed to be doing. And I think it just really shows that in this space, you have people who are uniquely dedicated and feel a certain way around death and dying, whereas like the rest of us kind of run away from the conversation.
Yeah,
So
it's contagious.
I will admit that I don't think a lot of physicians are really well versed in what death doulas do. And I know we're not going to jump into all of that. Today, we're going to talk about how to have these conversations around death and dying, because what I was so drawn to in our original conversation we spoke about is what you said about preparing before a crisis. And hospital stays tend to be very crisis driven. I mean, unless you have a scheduled hip replacement or you're going to show up for something that you're going to do or have a baby, these tend to be like surprises. And what I find around death and dying is that there's two lumps of dying in a hospital. The really traumatic, no one expected someone to pass away. And then there are people who have been sick for a while, or maybe not like floridly sick for a while, but not doing so well and have this slowly downward experience, like a stepwise decline. And there's so much that like maybe if people had seen along the way to say, no, I think this person is maybe coming towards the end of their life, things could have been different. But instead of treating those stepwise declines as an idea, or I shouldn't say an idea, as a marker of a point to have a conversation and realign goals, they get treated like crisis. And the person comes in the hospital and we treat this crisis, and they go out the hospital. In the hospital, we treat this crisis. And then eventually you get an astute physician or a nurse who's like, do you think Mr. Jones is dying? And everyone's like, whoa, wait a minute. And now it becomes a really difficult conversation and a really difficult thing for families to navigate, because they came in expecting a crisis to be fixed instead of now recognizing that this is the end of someone's life, and how we help them and care for them is no less active. And I really drive that home to people. This is no less of an active process as any other medical intervention, is how we help people. But maybe the goals are a little different. So how do you first approach people to say, hey, do you want to talk about this before you have to talk about this?
Yeah, usually when somebody learns what I do, they're either leaning in or they're leaning back. Like they're very curious about what exactly does a death doula do? Or I just don't want to be within your sphere because I could catch whatever you're doing. Like death is something that's contagious. If I even talk about it, I might hasten it. I wish we manifested in that kind of way in other parts of our life, but we just don't have that power to hasten our death if we talk about it. I try to remind people, you won't get pregnant if you talk about sex. You're not going to die if you talk about death. You're going to create connection by having those difficult conversations. You're going to create openness. You're going to become empowered because now you have understanding with the individual that you're speaking with. You have more information. You look inward, you reflect, you think about what's most important to you, and then you share that with the people in your life. So to start having these conversations, I think, is to start creating connection, deeper connection with those that you love most. And if you come from that place, I think it changes the dynamic of the conversation, that you come from a place of love, you come from a place of caring, you come from a place of curiosity. Then I think it takes some of that weight out of the conversation, and you can come from this place of, let's do this together. Let's figure this out together. Let's make a plan together. And like I said, people just feel more empowered.
So who do you find might be the person driving the conversation? Is it adult children looking towards their parents, or someone who's carrying a caregiver saying like, hey, the person that I'm caring for looks like maybe this is a conversation we need to have? Or is it the opposite? Your clients are the people saying, I want to talk about this. Help me have this conversation with my family.
All of the above. It's very individual to the people, the families that I'm working with. Oftentimes, the individual who is at the end of life, they know it. They know that. And they're sometimes afraid to admit it to their families because they don't want to scare their families. They don't want to hurt their families. But the truth is important. It's like false hope.
Mm-hmm.
And when a person who's at the end of life is willing to have those conversations, first, it's very healing for them. Our bodies, our souls, our spirits are always healing up until the very last moment. Maybe we're not physically healing anymore, that our bodies aren't going to physically get better, but our souls can, our spirits can, our hearts can heal up until the very last moment. And maybe that means having difficult conversations with an estranged relationship, or it's talking about regrets and you just want to get that off your chest and speak to something that you may have said to someone or you may have done or you've been holding on to for so long and you just want to release it. Mm-hmm. Those conversations become very important for an individual who is at the end of life to, I don't want to say confession, but it is releasing that weight from their soul before they get to that final stage, before they get to that transition. And it can be very healing.
And there's also, I think, some healing and releasing for the people who are helping with that conversation. So I tell family members, one of the biggest gifts you can give your healthcare proxy, the person who is going to make decisions for you, when it gets to the point that you're not able to make these decisions for yourself, the biggest gift you can give them is a gift of clarity. Yeah. And by telling them outright, they are then empowered to act on your wishes rather than act on what they think is best. And I have seen the difference in family members who have a clear discussion ahead of time. And they say, like, this is what mom wanted. She told me exactly. And others who are kind of in this murky water going, I don't know what they would have wanted. What is really best? This is what I think. This is what my value is, but this is what their value was. And it can make people feel like, oh my goodness, I'm the one who made this decision, or I did this thing. The phrase that I hear a lot is pull the plug. I can't pull the plug. I can't be the one to cause my loved one's death. And those families, it's like night and day.
And then you add guilt on top of the grieving process.
Guilt
Because
on top of the grieving process.
they didn't know. One of the things that I hear often is, oh, I just don't want to be a burden to my family. Yeah. And it's like, oh, what you don't understand is that by not having these conversations, that is burdensome to your family, to your point. They don't know what to do, and they're making decisions on top of high emotion, and they're not quite sure they're making the right decision. And maybe one sibling heard mom say, hey, I would never want to be intubated. And somebody else said, another child says, oh, well, she told me that do everything possible, and now you've got friction between family members. And that's not what you need when a loved one is at the end of life. What you need is everybody to be on the same page. And the only way that they can be there is if you share with them what your wishes are. And sometimes it's scary to look at yourself through the lens of your mortality. It's scary to think about the end. There's nothing that anybody can say that's not going to make that not going to take that fear away. So let's just accept that it's a scary conversation. Okay. And now we can move forward. Let's just accept that we're all going to die. It's going to happen. Yeah. So accept it and then move forward with, well, how can I plan best for this? I know this is a very silly way to make this point, but if you walk outside and it's raining, avoiding the fact that it's raining is not going to keep you from getting wet. Yeah. being prepared and holding an umbrella or
Is
wearing a
what?
raincoat will keep you from being wet, getting
Yeah.
wet. And it's a silly analogy, but it's true. If you prepare, you can't stop the rain.
Hmm.
You can't stop death from coming, but you can prepare for it so that you're better equipped to face it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can be surrounded by people who feel it as much at peace as they possibly can when they're watching a loved one die.
Yeah.
But at least what they're focusing on is their loved one and not making critical decisions that they're not sure are the right ones.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so many thoughts were going through my head when you were talking about the rain. And yes, we can't avoid it. We're all going to die. And gosh, that's like not what you turned on a podcast for some doctor to tell you. You weren't like, I'm going to listen to this podcast today. And the doctor's like, we will all die. Right. But it's 100% true. And I wonder sometimes if culturally, number one, I don't think like we as Americans are great at awkward conversations or
Mm-hmm.
hard conversations. Like if you think about the things that Americans don't talk about, like you don't talk about money. That's awkward and not polite. And now we see like there's all this information out that by not talking about money, people have had different contracts and different people are being paid differently and there's no parity. You don't talk about sex. You started with that, right? You don't talk about sex. And when you don't talk about sex, you end up with, pregnancies you weren't expected, STIs, like that you didn't know.
Yeah.
Like, what is this rash? And it's like, oh, no one explained these things to you. I mean, this is like just another one of those awkward, hard conversations that maybe culturally Americans are just not really good at having. And the other thing that I wonder is if we have done so much, and this is like Monique esoterical question here. Have we done so much in the space of medicine to remove ourselves from dying as a possible outcome that the death of one of my teachers called the dwindles? That you slowly, first you have heart failure, then your kidneys kind of go out and your legs aren't working. Now you're not breathing. This slow decline. Or even someone who has something like a cancer. We have all these chemos and immunotherapies and surgeries. And we've done so much in the space to separate ourselves from death as a possible outcome that is acceptable, that the only death that Americans kind of really think about are really traumatic deaths. Like someone walks outside and gets hit by a train, people accept that that is incompatible with life,
Mm.
right? But like if I say to you, your dad has kidney failure, heart failure, and he also requires oxygen. So technically that's respiratory failure. That's 3 organs that are not working. Don't still hear that this person is dying. They may see that like, oh, but you can just like do dialysis. You can do this. Like we've separated ourselves.
And I think the medical community sees death as failure. I mean, you're
Mm-hmm.
taught to do whatever is possible. So if to save a life, and I think that there's so much mixed up in this. It's like if a family member is just tired, like they're dying, they've gone through treatment after treatment, and they're just tired, they're done. How do you tell your family that? Like,
I've
how do you tell
had,
your family,
yeah,
I'm done fighting?
I
And
have
why is it a
had,
fight?
I have
You
had
know?
2 things on that. One, the language around diseases, death and dying. You're 100% right. When somebody dies from a chronic disease or a progressive disease, what do we say? We say they lost their
They
fight.
lost the battle.
They lost their battle,
Yeah.
right? We have the language, you're totally right, the language around death and dying as a possible acceptable outcome is not there. I think we're working as a medical community to change it. We have palliative care physicians
Mm-hmm.
and palliative care teams that are out there doing God's work, not only with patients, but also with providers, with physicians, nursing, therapists, to have that conversation and say, like, this is an acceptable thing to happen.
And I wonder if a doctor were to ask during the course of a treatment or even at a diagnosis, and ask it multiple times, maybe with each new treatment, just ask the question, what's most important to you here? Quality of life or quantity of life? That question in and of itself can make somebody really think about which direction they want to go with treatment. Because if they say quality of life and then they learn what life could look like if they go forward with treatment, then they get to make the decision, that's not quality of life for me. I don't want to live like that, constantly sick, and I don't have the energy to get out of bed. And this may or may not work. It might buy me a few months. Like honest questions, and then giving honest information about what will happen if you choose that path. And then the individual can, talk to their family or make a decision, but it's a more informed decision.
Yeah. And then you asked, I thought, a really insightful question. How do you tell your family that I'm tired? How do you tell your family that and I have had on several occasions, more than 2-3 times in my career, patients ask me to tell their family. And that there goes all that emotion of not wanting to disappoint people. Towards the end of someone's life, I'll hear people say, particularly parents, my daughter really wants me to do this. And it's not going to change what's happening. So for her, I'm going to do this.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't think that until you're in that moment, you can say what you will do. You just until you're in that moment, you can plan. It's kind of like a birthing plan. Best plan, and then forget it. Like
You're
none
going
of
to
that
play
stuff
music
happens.
and you're going to have lavender in the background. And then if you're like me, you show up, you're like, oh, we're having a baby? Like,
We're
what's
having a
happening?
baby. And things go crazy. Same, but at least you can be directionally correct. And more people than not are on a similar page. Like they understand what the dying loved one wants. They may not get that, but at least everybody has an understanding of what they want, and they can move in a directionally correct way instead of everybody or in different people thinking we should go this way. No, we should go this way. And when you're in that moment, that's when you your decision. But it can change like that.
Okay, let's go through the steps. Step 1, you said accept it, accept the rain. Like this is the thing that is going to happen to all of us. And maybe we can even reframe it as we're having this conversation because death happens to all of us, not just because it's happening to me, or to your loved one, but it's happening to all of us. So we're going to have this awkward, frightening, uncomfortable, morbid-ish type conversation.
And I think putting all of that on the table is really important because you've unpacked all the ickiness that everybody is feeling. Let's just acknowledge this conversation stinks, but it's an important one.
Okay, so we've acknowledged it. What are the next steps? How do we proceed through these conversations?
I think it's different at different stages. So if you have someone who's just received a diagnosis, then I think that's what's happening here. And it's important that we all understand what is most important to you as we move forward with your treatment. So that individual who's just received the diagnosis may not know what's most important to them. And a shameful plug is get in touch with a death doula at that point. Like we are trained to help you to reflect and dig into your life, do a life review, figure out what your values are, have these hard conversations. I would say at the moment of diagnosis, find somebody that you can talk to that will help you to reflect upon what your values are and how you want to move forward. Include your family in that conversation. If you're just walking around, living your life, you're healthy, you're happy, things are going well, great time to have these conversations. And I think the first step is, who's my healthcare agent? Who do I want to make the decisions for me if I get into a position where I can't make them for myself? So you made the point where an instant tragedy happens. Well, that may not kill somebody, but it certainly might make them so that they cannot speak for themselves. How do you know what you would want for your loved one if something tragic happened to them, but it didn't lead to death? So identify who you want to speak for you if you can't speak for yourself.
That's a big one. And when you identify your healthcare proxy, I suggest that people ask their healthcare proxy permission
Yeah.
to list them.
Name them.
I know that sounds silly, but I cannot tell you the number of times I'm like, this person is a healthcare proxy. And they're like, what? When no one, I didn't know that she listed me as that. So
Yeah.
like, I suggest you ask them, do you feel like you could do this? And then you give them the information because I'm going to give you the information.
Yeah.
This is what I want. And you arm them with that information. Then you ask them again, okay, you have that information. How do you feel now? Do you feel like this is something you're able to do? We always have like life roles for people, right? And people tend to think the oldest child
Yeah.
gets listed as a healthcare proxy or like the spouse or something like that. And I've found that people who have done this process very thoughtfully might come out with a different healthcare
Hmm.
proxy than their family and friends would expect. And one of like the funny-ish or stories that I had was a woman who was hospitalized and her healthcare proxy was one of her children who lived in a different state, not the one who lived with her, not the one who was her main caretaker. We had this conversation and I just kind of asked her, I said, how come you have this child who's a little bit further away and not this one who is the person here doing these things and helping you in the hospital? And she said, the one who lives with me loves me and will never let me go.
Mm-hmm.
The one who I listed knows how to follow directions.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and she's like, we may not always see eye to eye, but he knows how to follow directions.
Yeah.
And I gave him directions. And I was just like, well, that mother knows her children.
Yes.
And she was thoughtful in why she picked this specific healthcare proxy.
Sometimes your spouse, I mean, you're asking your spouse to do the unimaginable if it does come down to removing intubation or stopping a feeding tube or signing a DNR, if these conversations haven't happened. You're asking them to do something that is going to inevitably lead to their spouse's death. Some can't do that. Like, you want to find somebody who will fight for your wishes, because maybe our listeners don't, in Massachusetts, a living will is not a legal document that anyone needs to necessarily follow. It's a great thing to have, but you need somebody who's going to fight for you, who's going to be an advocate for you, who is going to push to make sure that your wishes are honored. And that child who's sobbing and is so emotional could maybe not ever make that decision.
Yeah.
But a good friend could.
Yeah. Could follow directions.
And follow directions.
The
Yeah.
thing that you want. Okay. So now we've picked our healthcare proxy. We've asked their permission and we're telling them that we're going to have this conversation. How do we unpack all of this?
I think it's little conversations at a time. Again, unless you're in the hospital and it's an emergency and you have to understand it's a little bit more abrupt, it's a little bit less gentle, but no more or less important. Like, where there is a possibility that you won't survive this. And we would like to know what's most important to you as it relates to your final wishes. Where would you, and then have some questions available. Like, where do you want to die? If we find out while you're here in the hospital that they can't do anything else for you, and it's okay for us to move you, would you like to die at home? Or do you want to stay here where there's 24-hour care? What kind of decisions would you want me to make for you if you become unconscious? And ask those main questions. Do you want to be intubated? Do you want a feeding tube? Do you want CPR? And there's a MOLST that you can have filled out here in Massachusetts, but you have to include your doctor in that conversation. But also, who do you want here with you? Who do you not want with you? That's an important question too. What kind of comfort care would you like? We get down to, when I have these conversations with individuals, we get down to like very specific comfort care wishes. Like, what kind of scent do you want? What do you want to see? If you're at home, where would you like to be? What room would you like to be in? Do you want the bustle of people coming in and out, and you're near the kitchen and you can smell the smells and you're part of what's the energy that's happening? Or do you want a calmer, more peaceful environment. So just asking questions like that. What do you want us to know when the time comes? Like in that moment, there are things like anointing rituals that we can do. There are other rituals. Are there prayers? Are there poems? These are just some of the questions that you can start with, and then they go off in other directions. These are just starting points. And I find that each individual conversation takes on its own energy based on the individuals that are having the conversation.
Yeah. So religious and cultural practices,
Spiritual,
spiritual
yep.
practices are a big part of this as well.
Those are
Um,
good conversations. Do you want somebody to come in here?
mhm.
And would you like to talk to somebody, a spiritual advisor of sorts, or
Yeah.
your rabbi or your priest, or
Yeah.
whomever?
That's a good point because though there's like a chaplain on call in the hospital, people might have a specific spiritual religious person who they would like notified
Mm-hmm.
to come and be by them. You also brought up the MULST, which is like my favorite thing to talk about. The MULST here in Massachusetts is a mobile medical order of life-sustaining treatments. Other states may call it a mobile order of life-sustaining treatments. I've seen portable orders of life
Pulsed,
pulsed, right? The
yeah.
portable order or physician's order of life-sustaining treatment, whatever it is. Here in Massachusetts, the hot pink form, kind of around the country, it's a hot pink form that says what your wishes are around CPR, intubation, specifically those two things like on the front. And then it also goes back into hospitalizations. Would you want to come back to the hospital if necessary for anything other than comfort? The back talks about dialysis, maybe
Mm-hmm.
fluids, artificial nutrition. I always suggest that a hospital stay is a really good time to reassess what is on
Mm-hmm.
your MULST form because a hospital stay may end up with a change in your abilities, a new
Yep.
diagnosis, new expectations. And if you practice readdressing your MULST as a family every time someone's hospitalized, let's say, like, does this still hold true? Would you still want to be intubated? Would you still want CPR and electric shocks? Do these things still hold true? Would you want non-invasive ventilation, which is a big mask that they put on your face that blows air in if you can't breathe for yourself? If you use a hospital stay as a time to readdress that MULST, then you're doing what you just said, little
Mm-hmm.
conversations at a time.
Yep.
You're practicing having this conversation over and over. So it's no longer awkward, it's no longer uncomfortable, but also now we're up to date. We've
Yes.
addressed it again. Your healthcare proxy knows that either this MULST stands or we made some changes and these are what the changes are and why. And that person has the most up-to-date ideas for you, what you would want around life-sustaining treatments. So I do suggest that MULST forms be readdressed after a hospital stay.
Another question that I like in this conversation is, what does a good death look like for you? And
Ooh,
it,
that's a
it
good one.
sounds like a good death. Like
That sounds
that's an
very Viking.
oxymoron.
That sounds like a Viking. I don't know if you watched that show on the History Channel, Vikings. They would always
No.
say like, this guy's going into battle to die a good death. Like,
Uh-huh. Yeah,
so
and for the soldier or the Viking
yeah,
on the battlefield
that was a good
is a good
death.
death.
Yeah.
So each individual person, if you just think to yourself, well, what does a good death look like? So, like you said at the beginning, we've already established, we've already accepted one day I am going to die. One day
Hmm.
is going to be my last day. What does a good death look like? Are you surrounded by family? Is there only one person there? Are you at home? Are you in the hospital?
Hmm.
Are you doing your most favorite crazy athletic thing and it goes wrong, but you died doing the thing you wanted to do? Like an extreme sport or something. Like what is it for
Hmm.
you? And if you as a listener, if you just think about that, it's a great place for you to start
Yeah.
the conversation. So
What
what
does
does
a
it,
good death
yeah, look
look
like?
like? Yeah, I like it. So accept the rain and figure out the best way that you want to be out in that rain. What is a good death? What does a good rainy day look like? Who do you want there? What are your spiritual and religious and cultural practices that may be important to you? what are your fears around pain?
Yeah.
A lot of people will say, as long as dad isn't suffering, define suffering. What are your fears around pain? What are your ideas around nutrition? Some people will
And
say, never put a
and
feeding tube in
fluids.
me. And fluids.
Fluids aren't necessarily good at the end of life. They are not good at the end of life, and people don't understand that. I don't want my loved one to starve or die of dehydration. Well, at the end of life, food is no longer needed, and dehydration is actually going to lead to a more peaceful and less painful death. People don't understand that, and that's why the education is so important.
Yeah. And working with your providers, if you're in the hospital, I'm a hospitalist. I've been helping people towards the end of their life. I'm really used to this conversation, but not all of my colleagues are. Not every physician loves these conversations,
Yeah.
and they're bringing their same fears around death and dying to work as everybody else. And so if you find that you're not getting that support, asking for a palliative care or a hospice consult. Does the hospital have someone there who can help your provider, help your team, who is more comfortable and more well-versed in that, and in pain management and symptom control and working with your hospice provider at home?
Yes.
Those are
And
really, really
that's where,
important.
I mean, I would love for every hospital to have death doulas on staff. It's a part of this process that, like you said, the medical community is not used to, nor are they comfortable being a part of. I've done trainings with social workers who have got almost no training in
Mm-hmm.
these conversations with individuals, and they're social workers.
Mm-hmm.
And so we talk about why it's so important to be able to be brave enough to say the words. Your loved one is at the end of their life. We need to have some important conversations. So, yes, the death doula, the palliative care team, anybody that is able to, in a caring way, talk about the end of life, those conversations need to be had.
Yeah, it is a fellowship. It's more training after you finish your residency.
Mm,
It acknowledges that there's more work to be done, there's more
yeah,
training, and how we support people and their family members as they're dying, I know is changing. I hope it continues to improve. I hope we continue to fund it and understand that death and dying can be just as expensive in this country as anything else. One of the things that I talk about often when people talk about death and dying at home is the understanding that it may not be something everybody can do.
yeah.
I have seen a lot of family members who are just not comfortable doing that at home. And I think that sometimes we have billed home hospice is the best thing ever. And that might not be the case for everybody. Like you were
Mhm.
saying, where does the person want to die? If they are capable and their family can support them in passing away at home, and that's what they choose, that's great. But I fairly recently had a case where everything was kind of set up for home hospice. And I was talking to the healthcare proxy, and they made a statement to me that just kind of stuck like a bug in my ear. And I kept thinking about it all night. And I was like, this doesn't sound like somebody who can actually do home hospice. So I
Mm.
came back the next day and I said, I know that everything is set up for your loved one to go home with home hospice, but you said this thing to me yesterday and it stuck with me and I thought about it all night. I'm going to ask you outright, can you do home hospice? Is this something you feel you can successfully support your loved one in doing? And that person started crying and said no. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And then that person said, and he never actually wanted it at home either.
Mm.
And it was like, wow, I met this family clearly towards the end of their hospital stay, but somehow conversations were had and the outcome of home hospice somehow got decided, but it wasn't what people really wanted or could do
I mean, how
and
often do we neglect that question?
so
What do you
yeah,
want?
what is it that you want? What can you do? I've seen family members really struggle with pain management at home. I've heard them say well, once they wanted me to give them this fentanyl lollipop, I couldn't do it.
Mm.
I couldn't give them morphine. I couldn't. And so going home with hospice is a family, community, support network process. And how much can your support network support that?
I had a client who said she wanted to die at home. And when she had the conversation with her family, one of her daughters said, I won't live here anymore if you die at home.
Ooh.
Like, I will leave this house. I cannot stay in this house if you die here.
Mm.
And it was, I mean, it was, and wow, like, good for her. And that conversation was necessary. And it
Yeah.
changed everything for that family.
Yeah. So
So
lay it
that's a
out.
lot to think about too.
Be really, really, really honest, both sides.
Both sides.
The person for whom you're speaking about, and then the family, the support system. Really tap in and figure out what can be supported at home. And the thing that might happen might pleasantly surprise you. People
Mm-hmm.
really might want to be there for you. I've seen church families set up like a potluck type calendar, and people come by with meals all the time, or neighbors come and sit so that a caretaker can take a
Respite.
break.
Yes.
People want to love on you, and you would be surprised. So just lay it all out there. What do we need, and who can come, who can't? And if I really want to drive this home, if at the end of the conversation is we cannot do that, that is okay.
Mm-hmm.
That is okay.
Yeah.
It is
One
our
of my
job to support you through that.
One of my mentors, Barbara Carnes, she's been a hospice nurse for decades, and she's an amazing end of life educator, hospice educator. She says death is not a medical event, it's a communal event.
Ooh,
And
I'm
it
feeling that.
does take a community to be a part of this dying process, for a family to be supported by many, the
Yeah,
village.
by the village.
Yeah.
So you said two things I'm stealing. One is the rain, and that death is it's a communal event. It's not
Yeah.
happening to one person. It's not happening to a family only. And when the person's gone, that community is still experiencing that.
Hmm. We can grieve together.
You would be surprised how at the end of someone's life, family members find out things like, wow, at work, like they were like that, or they had a
Mm.
really close relationship with this person, and they really helped out that person, and and that whole is different for everybody that's left after someone dies, and so it really is a communal event. It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that the most important thing about having this difficult conversation is to do it in bite-sized pieces. Be really, really present to where you're coming from, like that come from place. It should be a place of curiosity and love and care. And understand that it's fear-based. It is a fear-based conversation. And if you just put that out there, like all things that we're afraid of, I think of them like gremlins. If you shine the light on them, they lose power.
Like that.
So it's like, just be really, really in tune to the fact that this is hard, but you're all doing this hard thing together. You're
Mm,
a family. You're whatever that family looks like, but
yeah.
it's necessary. And when it's held with love and curiosity, you can learn a lot. You can come away with a lot. You can connect, get closer, and yeah, little bite-sized pieces.
Awesome. Awesome.
And reach out for help if you don't know how to start.
Wow. Well, you just did the thing I was going to ask you to do, which was give your two pieces of advice. I ask all, I guess. But the next thing, you brought goodies for us. So usually
I
at the end of
did.
these episodes, I say, hey, do you have a movie, a TV show? And I asked you when we spoke earlier, like a book that you think shows what you do well or does a good version of what you're talking about, and also one that does like a bad version, because I think it's
Oh,
also
I
important
didn't
for
read
us.
the instructions correctly. I
That's
just
okay.
brought two books and I have a show to recommend, but they are
Awesome.
in line. So this book, The Art of Dying Well by Katie Butler,
Love it.
is amazing.
Okay.
It just goes through almost every stage of life and what you would want to be thinking about as you're aging. The questions to ask, the things to ask your doctor about communal living, about your family. It's like a Bible for me. And then the book that started it all for me, this is a great novel called The Book of
Mm,
Two
two
Ways.
ways. Okay.
And you can get a little bit of a taste of what a death doula does.
Okay.
And then the show that I want to share is called Dying for Sex.
Oh,
It's
that's
on
a new
Hulu.
one.
Yes, with
Yeah.
Michelle Williams and Jenny Slate. This illustrates so beautifully the importance of honoring your own end of life wishes
Hmm.
and being okay with letting go of things and people that aren't serving you at the end of life. It's a show about friendship. I love it because it's like half hour, it's like 8 half-hour episodes, and you can do this in bite-sized pieces.
Yeah.
It's sad, it's beautiful, it's thought-provoking. I highly recommend it. I know that it is a tender topic for individuals who have experienced cancer, and I mean, even people in my life who have are refusing to watch it.
Mm.
I think this falls into hard conversations, but what you can get out of this show is a lot of insight into making your own decisions at the end of life, empowering yourself to honor those end of life decisions, and who you can depend on when you get to that point. It's funny, it's sad, it's inspirational, and I think it's a way for you to see that death can be beautiful. I know people won't like to necessarily hear that, but since it is an inevitable experience that we're all going to have, why not make it something that is beautiful?
That's great. That's my TV show is not as like beautiful. So, like, it's
What's
yours.
yours?
There was an episode a long time ago of a reboot of The Twilight Zone. I don't know if you remember the Twilight Zone
I
reboots like in the
remember.
90s. But in that episode, there was an episode where Death like went on vacation.
Ah,
Death didn't want to be Death anymore. Death felt really unloved and was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And in that episode, it towards the end of the episode, it becomes clear that Death is needed. Like people start asking
mm,
Death to come back because people are suffering. Horrible things are happening and people are in a state where this final part of life isn't occurring.
yeah,
And in the end, it's seen that like death is a part of life, and part sometimes can be that beautiful relief or that peace that someone is looking for
yeah.
towards the end of their life. And I just remember like I was a pretty younger kid, like maybe not pretty younger, like 15 or 14 or something like that. But it hit me because in it there's like this like bus accident or something kind of horrible, and these people are really suffering, and
Mm,
then death, and someone's like, where is death? And it's like sometimes death is an acceptable outcome.
yeah.
And I just thought when I was preparing for this conversation, I was like, I don't know if like talking about a reboot of The Twilight Zone
The
is really
Twilight
where we
Zone.
should go. But it's something that hit me as a pretty young child. And I will say that I personally have been fairly insulated from death. Like I have not had a lot of people in my life pass away. I have had grandparents, other family members pass away, but I know some people who have been like really touched by death, people who have lost a lot or have seen someone really suffer. And I've been blessed to not have that experience in my life. And so I think as a teenager who didn't have that really kind of any understanding around death, that sat with me. And it's been
Mm,
like clearly something that I've carried like 30 something years later that I still remember this episode that death was like, no, you don't like me anymore. Like, why am I doing this? People don't even want me around. And then in the end, it was like, you are a part of our world, and we do
yeah.
need you.
Not getting the respect I deserve. I mean, it's a bookend. I
Yeah.
truly believe birth, death. It's how we start, it's how we end. It's just part of that cycle.
And the thing that I think when you bring up these two things, the thing that's so important to me about these two bookends of life is that you're not alone.
Yeah.
Like babies don't come into this world alone. Babies like are usually surrounded by someone and then immediately loved on and coddled and brought to their mother's breast because we are to be surrounded by love. And I never want anyone to die alone. I always want people to die surrounded,
Yeah.
loved on, brought into the bosoms of the people who love them. There was a program when I was a resident called NODA, No One Dies Alone.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we talked about that
We
in our
talked
first
about that, yeah,
conversation.
at my hospital at Loma Linda in Southern California. And that idea that like you should not be alone towards
No.
the end. We shouldn't be alone when we're coming in. We shouldn't be alone when we're leaving. And if we have these conversations with our loved ones ahead of time and we're not doing what you said, crisis management, maybe we can slow down and allow people to be in that space with their loved one while they pass away.
Yeah.
So Aimée, thank you for a great
Thank
conversation.
you.
This was really lovely. I think this was a great way to start season 2 because what we talk about is being prepared.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a huge, huge thing to be prepared for. And I love your advice. You can't avoid it. Do it in bite-sized chunks.
Yeah.
Be really, really honest. And hopefully this makes those conversations a little easier. So
I
thank
hope
you.
so.
Wonderful.
Thank
And thank
you.
you. Thank you to my
Thank you for what
listeners.
you do.
Oh, thank you. This has been great. Thank you to all the listeners for
Yeah.
joining us for another season of Prescription for Admission, the podcast. This has been the end of episode 1. As usual, like and subscribe, follow the podcast, and we'll talk to you later. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.